Hey, it's Mattea. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen today. If you've been enjoying Bookends, why don't you give us a follow on your favorite podcast app? This will ultimately help us make more episodes and also connect you with more of your favorite authors. And don't forget to leave a review. It helps us get the word out to others who might enjoy the show. I hope you liked today's episode, and thanks again so much for listening. Hi, I'm Mattea Roach. Welcome to Bookends. Are you one of those people that loves getting into a good fight? Maybe you hear no politics at the dinner table, and you decide it's time to actually talk about tariffs. Or maybe you're a little bit too active in the comments of your neighborhood Facebook group. My next guest is no stranger to a good argument. In fact, after spending many years in the internet trenches, you could say she's an expert at it. Scaachi Koul is a senior writer at Slate, where she regularly explores the nuances of cultural events, like why the internet reacted so wildly to the assassination of a healthcare CEO, or why she finds Teslas so repulsive. In her new essay collection, Sucker Punch, Sachi turns that critical lens on her recent divorce, examining her own life with ruthless humor and introspection. Sachi grew up in Calgary and now lives in New York, but she joins me for this conversation in studio in Toronto. Hey, welcome to Bookends.
It's nice to listen to you.
Oh, thank you.
You have a very pleasing cadence.
There are people in my DMs who don't agree.
I'm confident. I'm confident there are people who don't agree.
That's very kind.
I like it.
Thank you. Well, as I mentioned, Sucker Punch is all about fighting with your family, with your ex-husband, with people online, but also with yourself. Why does fighting come naturally to you?
That's how I was raised. I get it. And not everybody grows up like that. Yeah, I have a lot of friends who are maybe conflict averse, and that's how they were raised. But I was raised to say what I wanted and how I wanted it, and to accept loss as well. I mean, it wasn't about fighting purposelessly forever, but that's how my family functioned. My parents are from India. They're loudmouth immigrants. It's a pretty typical story. And they raised loudmouth kids who see value in conflict. I mean, my brother's a lawyer.
Lawyers fight in an interesting way, I will say. It's often a more quiet style of argument.
I hate it. I hate the way he does it, because he's fighting with me like it's a math problem, and I'm fighting with him like we are dancing.
Right.
So it's a completely different conversation, but we both see the value in conflict, yeah.
One aspect of this book that's interesting is you do go on a bit of a journey over the course of the essays where you come out maybe a bit less sure that you love fighting all the time. But are there any good fights that you've gotten into lately?
Oh, that's a good question. Not many. Honestly, I have the highest capacity for conflict than I've ever had, and the least interest in it in my life. Which I think makes me a very formidable sparring partner, because it means that I'm really good at it and I also don't care.
You're happy to walk away, which scares people, because sometimes people then will chase after you and be like, wait, no, I have one more thing to say.
Yeah. So that's happening a lot these days, I feel like, in my life. I'm not, but I think because I'm so interested in leaving, like, oh, I don't have to do it. That's something that I really learned, I think, in my divorce over the course of working on this book as well. That if there's something I don't want to do, I can leave, man. Like, I can just leave.
Yeah, you do leave in the course of this book. You have this essay called 2 Stars, which really dives into your experience with divorce. And you talk a lot about the weird position that you're in as someone who lives your life very publicly, who writes about your life, and who wrote about your relationship quite a lot. There's a lot of weight, I think, that gets put on this split where people are wondering, like, wait, what happened? There's a sense of perhaps embarrassment or abashedness that you felt about the divorce. What was it like to leave and have the fact of your leaving be so public?
So I think almost everybody has to kind of play this game when they have a life event like this happen, because almost everybody is on the internet. So when you get divorced, if you're just a regular person, you're still playing that game of, how do I perform this out loud? How do I tell people? What do I tell people? Do I post about it? What do I do about the photos that I've left online? Like, that is all shared experience. I made a super cool decision in my 20s to become an essayist. So I had the added complication of how do I write about this? Because I have to. My first book came out around 8 years ago, almost exactly 8 years ago, called One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter. And a lot of it was about my family, my ex-partner, about the process of getting him sort of accepted into my family. That book ends with me not really knowing if my family is going to get their head around him. My dad wasn't speaking to me at the time when I finished that book because he was so upset about that decision I had made. And so I realized, anything I write, I have to acknowledge this because I made a choice to tell people. How do I offer a narrative without it feeling incomplete, which feels unfair because I've brought you into everything else. And I also didn't know how to write anything without acknowledging it or without really getting into the weeds on it.
Well, because then it becomes a weird omission, right? You
Yes.
talk about how do I navigate this? Do I just stop mentioning that I have a husband and then hope that people will notice?
Which they would have. They absolutely would have over time, and people did. But it just felt like not my style. And also, I was roiling with feelings. Like anybody would have spent time with me. And I was like a Calgary weather pattern. It was like 5 strong feelings in about 28 minutes. You need a coat. Everyone's unhappy. Nobody wants to be outside.
I remember when I lived in Calgary for a couple of years as a child. I remember it hailing on Canada Day once.
Yes, it always hails in the summer. You can have a day when it's minus 20 and then 20 degrees in one day. That's how it felt hanging out with me. So everybody would have known. I had no subtlety. But I was also angry about the idea of having to perform being normal anyway. I didn't want to anymore.
Talk more about that, because I think that's something that a lot of people who've gone through a big life event probably can relate to, of how long do I get to be really publicly upset about this? And at what point are people going to be like, okay, we get it. You're divorced.
Yes.
Please talk to me about something else.
I gave myself a year to be fully insane. Like money wasn't real. My decisions had no consequences. I could have anything I wanted. I could say how I felt as long as I didn't get sued, which I still abide by. And I could be selfish in a way that, as long as it didn't harm other people, that I could really kind of be like that. And I was wanton and surly and delightful and exhausting, and I drank a lot, and I got 600 tattoos, and I bought everything I wanted, and I moved into a new apartment, and I bought a custom pink velvet couch. I lost my mind, but it was what I needed. And I think the thing that I took from that year is I still carry with me disinterest in performing for other people, whatever I'm supposed to perform. I'm okay with people being like, oh, Sachi was upset. Yeah, I was. I was. Lots of people get upset. They just don't say anything.
Right. I wonder what it is, I guess, about you that makes you feel okay with being so visibly upset. Because I come from, I would say, a tradition of you don't get to be visibly upset for one whole year. Yeah. It's like, if there's a funeral, you don't cry. If you get a divorce, you probably don't talk about it because it's very, Catholics don't like that sort of thing, right? Yeah. So how is it that you feel comfortable, I think, with, some people might not enjoy the way that I'm handling this thing that's happening in my life, but I'm just going to do it anyway?
Catholics are so interesting. You guys are fascinating people. You're so dichotomous to the Kashmiris. I aspire to be more Catholic.
That's something people don't tend to say very often.
I know. You would only hear from about this one thing. How did I get comfortable being upset? I felt like through my marriage, through my whole 20s, I was so preoccupied with, what do people think of me? Do they like me? Do I seem reasonable? Am I doing a good job? Panicked all the time about what my standing was with lots of people. No one more so than with my ex-husband. Does he like me? Does he love me? Is he loyal? Does he want to take care of me? Does he want to stay in this relationship? Do I want to stay in this relationship? And so once that fell apart and exploded in such a catastrophic way, and I really had to sort of reset my life in a lot of ways, it was like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, the person I loved most in this world, who I thought I was building a life with and I felt very protective of and hoped was protective of me, does not care about me in the way that I need and have been asking for a long time. And I'm preoccupied with what? And to realize I did not have the protection I thought I had in my marriage. It was false and it was unnecessary. I didn't really need it. I can take care of myself. I learned that. But it wasn't there. So, okay, I'm going to just like be myself, I guess, because that's all I have. I don't feel like I have a choice, you know?
Yeah. I would say you are very unabashedly yourself in these essays. Like, you are not painting yourself as somebody who is victimized by circumstance, I would say. Like,
No.
You are really demonstrating, particularly in the parts of Sucker Punch that are pre-divorce, let's say, where you're talking about your relationship with your ex-husband. How are you able to be so honest about these experiences, even kind of knowing that people might judge the way that you talk about them, that there's going to be people that you know that read this work and think that's not particularly how I would describe these situations?
Sure. I mean, I'm not very likable, Mattea. And that's okay. That's fine. I accept those terms. There are people who read Sucker Punch, have read Sucker Punch, and don't like it because they don't like me. Okay. Word. Mm-hmm. Like, I won't win anyway. So you can't get everybody. I'm not going to. I think I was a little more likable in my first book, and that didn't win everybody over either, right? There's still always going to be some contingency of it. But Sucker Punch is the truth, but more important than that, it is honest. And that's all I can do, is offer my honest appraisal of what I think happened and how I feel about it. There will always be a million other versions of what happened, and they will also be honest and true. This is the best I can do. And I don't think I was perfect in anything, and I also think that's less interesting. I didn't want to write something where it was really obvious, like who the bad guy is. I also don't feel that way, but I didn't. It's less interesting to me.
Right.
I think modern marriage is more complicated than that.
Hey, welcome back to Bookends. Just a heads up before we get into the rest of my conversation with Scaachi Koul, this next part covers the topic of assault, so please take care while listening. It's interesting that we're talking a bit about the difference between truth and honesty and how there can be multiple appraisals of a situation, because one thing that you do in this book is you actually return to some of the things that you write about in your first collection, One Day We'll All Be Dead and None of This Will Matter. Sucker Punch responds to these previous essays, particularly in this essay called A Close Read, where you're interrogating a story from your first book. And it's about this complicated and violent friendship that you had during your university years. You're talking about a friend who assaulted you, but
I won't say it.
Yeah,
I won't
you
say it, and I
like
won't admit
he
it.
kind of shook me, but
Yeah.
it's almost a metaphorical shaking.
He rattled my cage.
Yeah, it almost shies away from the fact that this wasn't just like I got yelled at. Can you tell me a bit about the process of writing A Close Read? Because for me, I read A Close Read and then went back and read the other book, which was a weird and backwards way to go about things.
Yeah. It's so interesting to think about where our brains go when they're being harmed. I had this traumatic memory of this friend from school. I couldn't deal with it. I wrote about it. This chapter that I wrote in my first book was called A Good Egg. I got kind of close, but I couldn't quite get to the door, but I could see the door. And then I went away again. And so with Sucker Punch, I realized, well, I have options. I can write this from like this great distance and go forward and, live my life. Or I can correct a record that I think is inaccurate. And so I decided to do that. I didn't like that there was an incomplete, inaccurate record about my own life and that I had provided it. Offended me too. And so I started to think about this friend that I had and think more about what had happened and that he had assaulted me and how he had done it, and about my profound desire to protect him from what had happened in my own narrative. I didn't write the first essay because I fully understood what happened, and I was like, let me hide it from everybody. If I write it like this, then it means it didn't happen the other way. But I think maybe subconsciously I was trying to create a space for that event to be legible to me. It was the only way I could read it. And I kept thinking about it too with the work that I do as a reporter. I write a lot of Me Too stories. I cover a lot of things where women have to tell me about the worst thing that happened to them. And they have to tell me about the brutal rape or the brutal sexual assault or the child pornography that they got tricked into participating in, or whatever, human trafficking, or, forced sex work, all of this. And they often tell me with their name, and sometimes they tell me on camera. And they trust me with that. And I wasn't telling anybody what actually happened. As I started doing more of that work, it started to feel, that dichotomy started to feel offensive to me.
It's interesting to go back and read this essay, A Good Egg, where it's a very empathetic essay to this person who really harmed you. And I don't think you're not empathetic in the second essay. I think you really are. And you talk about wanting to reach out to this person, even after not speaking to him for years, to try and approach and apprehend what had happened.
Because he was my friend.
Yeah.
And so even in my anger, and I'm capable of doing this with everybody. I can do this with my parents. I can do this with my ex-husband. First, he was my friend. Second, he was someone who took something from me that was valuable. And I won't get that back. But it didn't feel hard to have empathy for him. What felt harder was to cut my empathy with reality.
I wonder, because you talk about A Good Egg in the essay in Sucker Punch, A Close Read, and you say, now I read this essay and know that I was a liar. I don't really think you were a liar. I think it was truthful,
it was
but in a
honest
different
at the
way.
time. Yeah.
In a different way. It was truthful to where you were at the time.
Yeah.
But I wonder then, you've now released this other collection of essays about a different period in your life. And presumably you may also grow to feel differently about some of the things that you've written in Sucker Punch.
Yeah.
How do you think you might apprehend some of this stuff later on? Do you think about that at all when you put this out?
Oh my God, all the time. And I think I've come to the feeling that to read something older and to feel like it is outdated and no longer represents me or my life or where I am is good news. I take that as a sign of victory. I'm glad that it feels like that. And even that line that you read about, I know I was a liar, that I wrote maybe 2 years ago. I felt like that then. I really felt like a fraud. I was struggling so much. I was so unhappy. 2 years ago, my mom had cancer. I was trying to help take care of her. I didn't have a job. My marriage was very much over. I was living in this little sad little apartment by myself with my cat. I felt like a liar. I don't really feel so strident now. Time has passed, and that's important. But records are important to me. I'm a journalist by trade.
Sachi, you just brought up your mom, and I do want to talk about your mom because she is so at the heart of so many of the essays in this book, and you actually dedicate Sucker Punch to her. If you could give a brief introduction to your mother for radio listeners who don't know her through your work, what's important to know about your mom?
My mom is a 5-foot-tall Capricorn who is pretending to be an Aries. So
see, I know what that means, but please do tell more.
I will. I feel like I grew up afraid of my mother, as most brown kids are afraid of their parent. My mom was everything when we were younger. She was disciplinarian. She was the comfort. She made all of our food. She took care of us. My dad was there. I'm confident he was there. But it was like my mom's show. That was kind of always the case. And we have a really intertwined relationship. It's very complicated. Our pain feels twinned and our joy feels twinned. So I do think we're really similar. So she's bombastic and exhausting and loud and funny and is also happy to have a fight and has always sort of kept my dad in line in a way that I have admired and feared. But yeah, she's the core of our family too. So it made sense that she would be the center of the book.
It's interesting the way you describe your parents' relationship because it feels as though there's this very, I would say, traditionally gendered division of roles between your parents.
Labor.
That your mom is the one who is cooking. Your mom is the one who is remembering people's birthdays. Your dad seems he seems to never have to know a birthday, but is the one who's going out and working.
I don't think he knows his. All the women in our family are kind of in in these relatively gendered roles, they are primarily caregivers. Most of them have children. All of them get married. And the men don't do that. But the women also are like kind of patriarchal in our families, too. They really run everything.
Seeing these women that inspire almost fear and awe and love in the people around them, how did that influence your idea of what it means to be a wife?
I did think that there was sort of inherent conflict related to marriage. And I think a lot of people feel that way. You kind of see it in, whenever somebody talks about marriage, they're always like, boy, it's hard. Like, Jesus Christ, is it a slog? Like, people talk about it like that.
You go to an anniversary party and sometimes it feels like the couple's about to divorce.
Have these people been held hostage? It's like they are, like somebody locked the door behind them in the chapel and they were told they could never leave. People talk about it like that. And I sort of did experience it as ultimately extremely loving, very loyal. Like, my parents took and continue to take wonderful care of each other and like each other at their core. However, steeped in conflict, steeped in arguments, always having a fight. Sometimes like with a smile on your face, sometimes not, but always having a fight. And I just thought that was the process. I thought the role I had to inhabit as a wife was to always be fighting to be seen and loved and heard. And my subversion, conversed to my mom and her mom, who got married at 14. My mom got married at 24. My subversion was that I wasn't going to be a housewife and, I worked and I had my own money and I wasn't going to raise children. That was what I was doing. But I was still sort of abiding by the gender roles of the emotional side of being a wife and sort of what you run in the house and what you take care of, what what you're responsible for. And then over time, I was like, I don't think I want to do that either.
Do you think there is a version of marriage that would work for you? I'm almost curious.
I don't know. I mean, listen, I want to be strident because those are like fun answers to be like, no, never. And I do kind of feel like that. But life is so long. Like, it's so long. And so I don't know what's going to happen in 20 years. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not that old. I feel completely washed. But like, yeah, I have a lot of life left. So I don't necessarily see the value of it for me. I get why people do it. But right now, I don't know why I would need it.
I do want to return to your mother and where she's been at, I guess, during this period of your marriage failing and you navigating this period of your life where you're newly single and I think just a lot of stuff going on. When it rains, it pours, I would say, is the theme of this next essay I want to ask about. You write this essay called Auspicious, where you talk about your mom being diagnosed with breast cancer while you're also dealing with all of this fallout from your marriage breaking down.
Yeah. So my mom got cancer a year after me and my ex separated. So I was still sort of in the gummy
in the trenches.
I was still in the trenches a little bit.
Yeah.
And I lost my job a week before she was diagnosed. So I was also unemployed and without health insurance in America, which is its own burden, and deeply, deeply afraid of what was going to happen to her. And I think the timing of it made all of us feel like it was cosmic, like it was a punishment. And I felt like it was a punishment for my divorce. She also felt like that a little bit because the timing just felt so superstitious, and we are superstitious, and we, for a while I was like, is God mad at me?
Well, and you say someone mentioned to your mom, oh, it's breast cancer because it's close to your heart.
Someone asked her which breast it was, and she said my left, and they said, oh, that's so close to the heart. And I wanted to pull all of the teeth out of that person's head and put them in a piano so I could play a song about how much I hated them. I was so mad. She was so upset. Scared her. Like, I still think about that.
People say the darndest things.
You're so polite. They say the dumbest things when someone is in like dire straits. It's crazy. But the illness was the most destabilizing thing of anything that had ever happened to me in my life. It was brutalizing. And it, again, made me rethink my entire life, which I was pretty sick of doing by then.
How did it make you rethink things? I can also imagine that for you, you're living so far from where your mom was, and that presents a whole set of challenges when you're dealing with a sick family member.
Well, the good news is I didn't have a job.
Right.
So it was
so you can just leave.
It was actually pretty easy to just be like, I'm going to go home and see what I can do here. The membrane between here and where we go when we die is so thin. And I really felt like we were pushing against that membrane the whole time. And it made my life feel small. And then I think I was like, oh, I've let my life get very small, which is its own problem. But how could I waste my finite time? Life is long, but I have actually very little of it compared to, the whole universe. How could I waste my finite time yelling at a man that I was going out with because he didn't want to hold my hand in public when my mom was sick? Like, how could I waste my time on Twitter yelling at some guy who tweeted at me, Elon Musk rules, when my mother is like infirm in the hospital, just got surgery? It made everything feel stupid. Like everything was stupid and a waste of my time. And so for a while I was like strident in this way, which is nobody wants to hang out with this person who's just like, this is dumb. This is not worth my time. This is a waste of time. Eventually it mellowed and I'm still kind of in that place. She's in remission. All's well. But like, we die at the end of this and I'm supposed to be like upset that somebody left a Goodreads review that they don't like my book. And I think in her illness too, I saw how there had been space created between me and my family through my marriage, even though they came around and they did like him. But there was an inherent battle for kind of my time and my energy, I think, even in that marriage. And I was like, oh, this guy is just some guy I know. That's my mom. This is just some guy. So I really locked into that feeling of like, he's just a man. They're just men. Even my dad, I love him to death. He's just a guy. It like contextualized everything in a beautiful way, frankly. Not that I wanted any of it, but it flattened everything.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to get mad about flat land. Why? It's actually pretty easy to ride on it.
Your love for your mom and that sort of twinning that you talked about of feeling
codependence.
That would be one way to put it. But I think people who go through this sort of thing, this is one way in which a lot of people do respond to it, is you become very entwined with the joys and sorrows of the other person. I think particularly like moms and daughters have this happen quite a lot. And so you're writing this love letter to your mother, but it also feels like you're kind of falling back in love with yourself a little bit over the course of this book and realizing I'm a person outside of my marriage. I need to think about what I can do to, as you've said, make it so that my life is not small and I'm making the most of my time on earth. How has the process of writing this book and working through some of these issues helped you do that?
One thing that really drove me crazy after I got married was that I felt like I stopped having a name. And when I would be introduced by my ex-husband, he would introduce me as, and this is my wife. I hated it. I hated it. He would do it sometimes. And at first it's like, oh, you're excited because you're married.
Right, it's fun.
And so, yeah, like I would say it too. And I write about this, that how fun it is to say the word husband. It makes you feel very moneyed. I hated that. And I felt so much like I lost my identity in the fight I was having in my marriage. I felt like I couldn't see myself clearly. I didn't know who I was. I felt beleaguered and responsible. I felt so responsible for the whole entirety of my marriage falling apart. I am not. I have a fraction of the responsibility, as does my ex, as does like time and space and climate change, like politics and like the pandemic. You know what I mean? But I was so unable to see myself clearly that I couldn't even really adjudicate it. And so I think like in the process of writing the book, you kind of have to adopt a new identity. So I have been very loudly and vocally a professional ex-wife for the last couple of years. And that was how I did it. The nice thing about being divorced is nobody has to see me clearly other than myself. I am the only mirror left in the house. There isn't anybody else I have to present for. and I don't have to worry about how I'm perceived by anybody else, especially because in my divorce, my parents started to see me very clearly. I think this is the clearest they've seen me in my life. This is the most honest I think I've been able to be with them. It's, I think, the most my mother's been able to see me, which is sometimes very painful. I think she sometimes has a hard time with it, as I would with anybody else too. But great. Now I can see myself, and then I don't have to worry about what anybody else is doing.
That feels like a nice place to end things. Sachi, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.
Scaachi Koul is the author of Sucker Punch, and she joined me in our Toronto studio. This episode was produced by Ailey Yamamoto. Our senior producer is Jacqueline Kirk, and our executive producer is Aaron Balser. A huge thank you to our audio tech, Aronde Williams, and to the entire CBC Books team. They are spectacular co-workers, and they make the show happen for you every week. I'm Mattea Roach, and this is Bookends. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Because when the book ends, the conversation begins.